Welcome at the new edition of the Market Reporters. Every week we look back to the last week, and then we look back what happened in the markets all around the world, but also we listen to our clients and we try to talk about the most important topics that you asked us during the last week.
Exactly.
Martin will talk about it later. I will go through the week, and of course, since last week we are in a new half year, the second part of the year. And I think if you look at on quarterly basis, the first quarter the markets went down, or at least from March. The second quarter was the quarter of recovery. Yeah. But if you look back at the first half of the year, then it's all about volatility.
Absolutely.
And for example, if you look at the Dutch stock market, the volatility, the daily movement of the AEX, the Dutch market, is more than 2%. So on average, every day in the last half year, the markets went up or down. They moved 2%, and that's quite high.
Especially if you compare that to just having money in the bank and a saving account.
Yeah. And I think that because that with all the problems in the world, they are not solved tomorrow.
No.
So I think that the markets, I don't have a glass ball, but I think that the market will stay in those periods. So that's good news for traders, because you can, if something moves, you can act on it. But for investors, it's sometimes difficult to deal with it, because what I said, the example, the 2%, that's an average on the stock market, on the biggest Dutch stocks. On Monday, Uber Eats announced that they bought Postmates, and because of that, they are the second largest food deliverer in the US. They have a market share with 37% after DoorDash. Yeah. And also, finally, I can almost say, there was news about Berkshire Hathaway, the investment fund of Warren Buffett, and they announced that they bought for $4 billion a stake in an energy company. SMIC did an IPO in Shanghai, and they raised almost $6 billion, and that's of course it's quite a big IPO. It's also not the biggest. You're going to talk later about a bigger IPO. But the interesting thing is that this company is a chip producer, and by raising money for this company, the $6 billion, this Chinese chip producer, they will be stronger in the local market, so they're less depending on chip producers all around the world. And of course, China is buying stakes everywhere where they can, in companies and indirect in companies. In countries where they, for example, need some kind of materials.
Strategic knowledge, the buying knowledge of Western.
So this is another really important step I think they did. Walmart announced that they're gonna compete with Amazon, because they have already clients. They're gonna do it through a membership that they have already with the clients. And of course, they have a lot of products, and they have the distribution already. Yeah. And I think it's good news that finally a big player is not starting from scratch, but is a big player is going to compete on a high level with Amazon. I think it's good news for us as consumers. It's good news. I think maybe for a shareholder it's a little bit less good news. And also, I think an interesting cooperation between Renault, the French car company, and Google. They announced that all the data from Renault will be stored in the near future in the cloud from Google, and they are not only going to store the data, but they're also going to analyze the data, and they're going to improve the way of working within the whole Renault company to be more effective. On Thursday, gold closed for the first time in 11 years above the $1,800, and we hear a lot from clients talking about gold. Yeah. Last week we talked about gold, how you can invest in it, how you can short and long, and gold's always a difficult topic. But if you want to have some ideas from us with it or some support, you can find us. Brook Brokers, unfortunately, that's the oldest clothing company from the US, is almost going bankrupt, and they make mostly suits. And of course, during the corona, I think when I was working at home, normally I don't wear a suit. And so a lot of people didn't wear a suit, and after the corona crisis, not the first thing that they start buying again were suits. So unfortunately,
maybe we have maybe a shift that people start wearing less suits.
Yeah.
Why would they?
Yeah, definitely. So unfortunately, it's always, if it's a company that exists for generations, and that's generations and generations. It's always very sad if you hear that news.
Absolutely.
And also the last thing I want to close down with from my side is that Trump announced that he is investigating to shut down social media company TikTok.
Yeah.
And I think that this is just an announcement, just something he's thinking about, or the administration of Trump is thinking about. But it also says something about what I think he will do until the elections or in November about, playing hard against China.
No, 100%. I agree with you.
What did you hear from?
I had a request about a client whether I knew something more about the IPO of Airbnb. Well, unfortunately, I don't have a date yet. I'm also not 100% sure on which market they will get a listing. I did a bit of a deep dive. The company is worth now at the moment about 38 billion, and they're operating in a 2 trillion travel industry market. So it's a really big player actually within that market. How long did it take them to achieve that? It took them about 12 years. So Airbnb started in 2008. And they managed to have 400 million users up till now, so that's enormous.
They have problems now.
They have, of course, some problems. The whole industry is suffering. Yeah. And I'll give a really good, clear example of a Spanish company in a minute. They have 7 million unique accommodations around the world in 191 countries. And if you look on similar sort of companies, they're basically on the 3rd spot. So you compare them with Priceline, Marriott, and then you have based on market capitalization, Airbnb, and that's pretty something because they passed Hilton and Hyatt, which are also very large companies, of course, with a listing on the US stock market. If you then have a look at a Spanish stock,
without having any accommodation by themselves.
No, exactly. So that's the
just a broker.
Just a broker, basically an intermediate, an e-commerce. Yeah. If you look at a Spanish company, it's a company worth 26.5 billion euros, and if I say the name, you might think, you might never have heard of it, but I'm sure you've used it. It's Amadeus. It's a company that up till last year had a growth each year about 10-20% of their profit. Last year they made 1.1 billion euros of net profit, and the prediction for this year is that they're not going to lose money, but they're possibly going to be around zero. So a company that last year, 2019, managed to make 1.1 billion euro profit, now it doesn't make any profit, and still the figures of the second quarter of this year are not in that prediction yet. So this is quite something. They at the moment are valuated 30% under the book value, so there is of course some damage calculated in the share price. They had to go to the market to get money, so they gave out a convertible loan of 1.5 billion. And if you look at the company, what are they actually doing? They basically have the software for 489 airline companies to book a flight, to get your seat allocated, but also, for example,
I think that are all the airline companies.
Nearly all airline companies, and also the major hotel companies, Priceline, Booking.com, for example, use them. But also, if you book a flight, I don't know, Ryanair, Transavia, or Jet Air, or whatever, you always get the offering to directly book an accommodation. They are basically behind that technology. So really interesting. To close off this week's session, also another client asked me what is the quality of the debt at the moment in Europe, because he was looking to buy some bonds. Now 49% of the Euro stocks, so basically companies, I'm talking about corporate bonds, have a rating at the moment of BBB+, so more or less half. And BBB+ means basically, another way of saying for this, it's an investment grade bond. So basically the chance that you will get your money back at the end of the period is high. If you then look at the difference between North and South, and also the UK, Italy at the moment has 0% of investment grade bonds. Spain 23%, the Netherlands 51%, the highest is Switzerland. 84% of their bonds are really good quality, so you can basically say, if I invest in a Swiss bond,
big differences.
Yeah, I'll get my money. Huge difference, and also, of course, investing in a Swiss bond will possibly not give you any yield. You possibly have to pay money to keep your money in a Swiss bond, and the UK has 48% of investment grade bonds. Then Spain and Italy on itself, 29% of Spain and 22% of the Italian bonds have a junk status. And then I'm talking about maybe not on government level, but 22% of the corporate bonds at this moment having a junk status. So think about it, 1/3 of all the companies will not be able to possibly pay back their debts. So the chance that they won't pay that back. So there's a huge difference between the north and the south, and yeah, I think that's
that's
important.
unfortunately what you see in all Europe, the big differences between the north and the south of Europe, not only on but you see it here in figures. Hard figures, unfortunately. Okay, thank you very much for watching. I hope to see you next week.